So our first speaker is presenting the coming cyber war, and is being given by Ms. Andrea Shaman-Phillips. She's the Director of Federal Engagement at Fortress. Andrea is skilled in strategy development, cross-functional team leadership, evaluating operative accomplishments, and social engineering. She has a background in working with federal programs as well as cybersecurity inspections, cyber readiness, resilience, and compliance. Andrea is the head of federal operations at Fortress Information Security based in Orlando, Florida, the executive director of the Florida Cyber Alliance, and the chair of the National STEM Committee for the United States Navy League. She is a CMMC AB registered practitioner and earned a Master's of Business Administration focused in management and leadership from Rollins College, the Crummer Graduate School of Business. Please welcome to the stage Ms. Shaman-Phillips.
Thanks. All right, so I was assured that my microphone would work if I push the button. Excellent. All right, well, good afternoon. As Bob mentioned, my name is Andrea Shaman-Phillips, and I'm here today to talk to you about the coming cyber war. And now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but the truth is that we don't actually need to predict the next cyber war. We need to prepare for it. And real preparedness means building resilience by practicing creative problem solving and reducing over-reliance on systems that may be brittle or subject to failure. And most of all, it means empowering your teams to adapt when the script goes out the window. So, well, that definitely wasn't how it was supposed to go, but that's the point, right? When we imagine the coming cyber war, our minds usually go to cinematic catastrophe, cascading failures, meltdowns until everything collapses in digital chaos and then your systems go dark. But real incidents aren't theatrical, and they're rarely predictable. We don't get to choose what happens or who's in the room when it does, or what breaks when that all falls apart. But what we can control is our readiness. So while this talk is called Beyond the Coming Cyber War, I'm not here to predict the next attack vector or outline the next global cyber conflict, I'm sorry. It's not about fear, and it's certainly not about prophecy. It's about building resilience so that we can survive whatever comes next. But first, let's talk about the problems with prediction, about why the narrative around the future cyber war actually fails us. Think for a moment about what a futuristic cyber war would even look like. Blackouts, panic, catastrophic, damage in the streets, probably a combination of all of those things, but we don't know, and pretending that we do is a complete waste of time. So instead, let's think about some real-world examples of cyber incidents with some pretty devastating impacts. In 2021, Colonial Pipeline was attacked by a hacker group using a password that was found on the dark web. So if you haven't updated your passwords recently, please do that now. The password gave access to Colonial's billing system, which meant they weren't able to monitor the flow of their main pipeline. So they were left with no choice but to turn it off. That led to panic buying of gasoline, fuel shortages in 5 states. American Airlines' major hub in Charlotte was disrupted, so domestic and international flights were derailed. And over the 5 days of that cyber incident, a national emergency was declared, and the president issued an executive order prioritizing cyber response and cybersecurity. They also ended up paying a $4.4 million ransom in order to regain access to their systems. Last year, it was CrowdStrike, when developers pushed a corrupted file to their production environment. It was basically a flawed update. It was an empty file, but they pushed it to the production environment, and suddenly millions of users worldwide experienced the dreaded blue screen of death. Now, unless they could roll back to a previous backup that had happened recently, they were hamstrung. They had no access to any of their systems, and this impacted airlines again, healthcare, banking, even our beloved Starbucks was impacted, and for over a week had to take all of their orders manually. So the direct losses financially from that was $5.4 billion, and the estimated financial impact worldwide was more than double that. And then 2 weeks ago, Cloudflare went down when a coding file that was meant to manage their bot mitigation system actually got too large and triggered a software meltdown. So with that, it took down several online services, including X, ChatGPT, Canva, and a lot of other systems that we rely on every day. Now, I don't want to delve too deeply into the rippling impacts of losing ChatGPT in a world where we're all becoming increasingly reliant on AI, and you'll hear more about that throughout the week. But the point is that nobody predicted that those would happen. No model could foresee them. No algorithm whispered, heads up, next Tuesday is going to be a rough one. And part of the reason is because the attackers evolved too quickly. They're leveraging AI to generate malicious code, operating around the clock, and our human prediction will never be able to be faster than that. So there's a saying that armies prepare for their last war and not their next one. Well, Eisenhower adopted that and reframed it, saying plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So the real question isn't how the next cyber war will unfold, it's whether we've even built the capacity to respond and recover, regardless of the shape that it takes. And cyber incidents are not just technical, they're psychological. There are human beings on all sides making real decisions that also do not follow a script while they are under intense pressure. Dr. Mary Aiken, a renowned cyber psychologist, has done extensive research highlighting how digital environments shape human behavior. Under pressure, humans are prone to panic, cognitive overload, and learned helplessness. And those reactions can escalate a crisis just as fast as malware. At the same time, our educational systems have prioritized standardized learning over creativity for decades. Everything is about rote memorization over free thinking, and recovery from any crisis, including cyber incidents, requires improvisation and creative problem solving, in addition to rapid recall and decision making, not just memorized answers. And if you've ever been in a situation where you've tried to answer trivia questions under intense time pressure, you know that it negatively impacts your recall. So we need thinkers, not box checkers. So the key is actually a resilience mindset. Resilience is the opposite of prediction. And true resilience is about leveraging defense in depth so that you have technical and non-technical safeguards and backups, working to reduce mission impact when critical systems inevitably fail, creating processes that can flex and bend without breaking, and training your team so that communication and organizational silos don't paralyze progress. So how do you build a resilience mindset? Well, you start with data, understanding and being honest about where your vulnerabilities are, knowing what's in your supply chain and in your deployed systems. True resilience is the ability to keep moving even when most of your assumptions fall apart at once. Then you layer in multiple security controls by utilizing defense in depth so that you can have both technical and non-technical safeguards in place. And defense in depth isn't just a technical framework, it's actually the backbone of operational resilience. It's the idea that you build in multiple independent layers of protection, including technical controls and human readiness, so that you can reduce the likelihood that a single incident will lead to catastrophic failure. The goal is to make sure that every layer buys you time. One of my favorite quotes is from Captain Tammy Jo Schultz after she safely landed that Southwest jet when she lost an engine. And she said, as long as you have both altitude and ideas, you are okay. Using defense in depth gives your team both. So think about it. If your team was hit, and I'm not trying to bring this on anybody, but if your team was hit today by a cyber attack, how prepared would you be? Well, this year, Census-Wide conducted research by surveying 1,000 organizations over 9 countries, asking just that question. And it showed that while over 95% of organizations have a cyber crisis plan, more than 90% also reported that various roadblocks within their organization would hinder their ability to act properly. And this aligns with the anecdotal evidence. They also found that 71% of those same organizations had already experienced at least one high-impact cyber incident that disrupted their critical business functions. So their plans aren't even working. Communication gaps between stakeholders slows your responses. Technical folks are hamstrung while comms issues are resolved and leadership makes decisions. And that's why it's so important to run tabletop exercises that expose these blind spots, not just in your tech stacks, but in the assumptions that you're making about your communication, your staffing, your leadership, and your decision-making authority. Effective training tools look surprisingly game-like and are less structured exercises that actually force novel decisions. Instead of using a standard template, why not use backdoors and breaches, which builds team-based, scenario-driven incident response habits, or train adaptive thinking, teamwork, and the balance of chance by inviting your critical response team to play Dungeons and Dragons. People are presented with a scenario and they're making decisions, but there's that roll of the dice that's going to add that additional layer of chaos to let them know if what they're working is truly going to be successful. Many organizations treat tabletop exercises like compliance activities. They're predictable, they're safe. They tend to follow an idealistic path where everyone is doing their job and all the key people are available and they're all at work that day. They assume that everything else is working as it should, and they miss the big bad by eliminating the chaos that real incidents thrive on. Real incidents do not follow scripts, and this is exactly why overly scripted, templated exercises can create a false sense of security that falls apart the minute the script goes out the window or something unexpected happens. They need to be more than just check the box exercises, and especially because they don't even check the box. What they're doing instead is instilling a false sense of confidence. So instead, what we need to do is ask things like, what if the person who manages your security enclave and response plan is on PTO and you cannot reach them? What if it's Christmas Day, or you're in Orlando and we're in the middle of a hurricane? What if two leaders disagree? Who breaks the tie? Who makes the final decision? Or what if two critical systems are down, but only one is a result of a cyber incident? A realistic tabletop has to be messy because that's what aligns with real life. It needs to force decisions with complete information. It has to create time pressure. It needs to bog down your support team with calls from angry customers while you try to minimize the damage. An effective training scenario exposes weaknesses. It doesn't hide them. And perhaps most importantly, participants need to know that their leadership has their back throughout this whole process and supports experimentation and creativity. Otherwise, people are just going to perform to the room instead of revealing how they'd actually behave. It's no surprise that people don't want to fail in an exercise, especially if their leadership is part of it or watching or using the results of this training scenario to manage their next round of promotions or something like that. This type of pressure immediately reduces the fidelity of your scenario and is not representative of real-world behavior. And if you've never seen any of the studies around the Hawthorne effect, where people immediately change their behavior once they're being supervised, it's true across all industries, not just here in training. People are not behaving exactly as they would in a real event, and so that means that many weak points or potential failures may not even be exposed. It also means that people don't have the courage to speak up if they know that there might be a potential failure somewhere and they don't want to look bad or bring someone else on their team out to look bad. Tabletops need to encourage adaptive thinking. In real incidents, things are confusing. There are multiple stakeholders and things are happening all at once. Novel problems that don't follow patterns. People need to feel empowered to make impactful decisions quickly and know how to move forward even when the lead decision makers are not available or if they're in conflict. Having cross-trained teams will prevent bottlenecks when your key staff are unavailable, and a clear delegation of authority allows them to create a tie-breaking decision to move forward and advance the organization out of the chaos. And so then this is where I get to talk about the Kobayashi Maru. And I heard that Bob Sautelere talked about that last night. But for anyone who's cool and therefore unfamiliar with Star Trek or the Starfleet Academy training syllabus, the Kobayashi Maru is an unwinnable training scenario that was actually designed to test cadets, not on victory, but on how they lead under conditions where success is literally impossible. Because winning isn't the point. Instead, it's used to see how cadets will behave in a crisis, how they adapt, how they handle impossible trade-offs. I'll also add here, which I know Bob did not add, that Captain Kirk was famous for being the only cadet who ever won this scenario, but he did it by changing the conditions of the test. Some called it cheating, but that's just semantics. But that's the mindset that we need, is not follow the script, but adapt the scenario. We don't train to win the exercise. We train so that we don't freeze when reality refuses to play by our rules. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about science fiction, but it's important to remember sci-fi does not predict the future. It reflects the present. The real future probably won't look anything like Blade Runner's neon dystopia. In fact, it'll probably look more like the most annoying parts of our current technology. Legacy systems kludged together with duct tape, or trying to run a new UX that it was never designed to support, and patches being deployed 5 minutes before a board report is due. Don't believe me? Go back and watch movies about the future that were made 20 years ago. They imagined flying cars and talking robots. Their future tech already looks outdated. Remember how impressed we all were with Will Smith's little Bluetooth earpiece in iRobot? Well, pop culture definitely shapes our expectations on cyber conflict. It's not prophecy, it's commentary. It shows like the Black Mirror and the Matrix that is to illustrate our ideas and anxieties about technology far better than they'll forecast our future, which is why focusing on the exact shape of the next cyber war is unproductive. The future is too messy and too nonlinear. It's too human. So I'll leave you today with your call to action. Build human-first cyber resilience. When the lights go out and the alerts don't make sense, it's not your tech stack that will get you through, it's your people. So what does training resilience in action look like? And training like incidents are real, stress testing all of your assumptions, encouraging creative decision-making, flattening a hierarchy in order to eliminate communication silos, building muscle memory for uncertainty. And you do that by running training scenarios that force decisions with missing data, challenge automation and authority, mix departments and roles, use call signs and other identifiers to break down rank barriers, or take a clue from the Starfleet and build a training scenario that no one can win and see what happens. The only thing we know for sure is the next big cyber incident is coming. We won't know anything what it will look like. We don't know what to expect. It won't follow patterns, and it certainly won't wait for us to be ready. But it will come. And when it does, you probably won't be asking yourself, how accurate was Andrea's talk at that one ITSEC? Instead, the real question will be, were you ready to respond? Because when your screen finally goes dark, what matters most is what your people do next. Thank you.
All right. Awesome, Andrea. That was great. Hey, we have about a few questions in here in Slido, so I'll ask a few of those. But please, if you have a question that you haven't put in the Slido or you'd rather ask it on the mic, please step up, start queuing in the mic area. But I'll ask the first question out of Slido.
While I organize my defense in depth here.
There you go. All right. First question. Increasingly, to ensure up-to-date cybersecurity tools, software is being installed in protected segments of computer systems, such as CrowdStrike was doing in the Windows kernel. So how do we balance the needs of security with the necessity of keeping systems up and running?
That's a really great question. And I would say you can do it fast, or you can do it in a way that's comprehensive. You often can't do both. And having cross-functional teams involved is key on all of these things. So making sure that you're protecting your critical data, your mission-critical data for your program is incredibly important, right? So that you can stay resilient, you can keep running, you can get to the central mission objective, whatever your program is. But then you're also satisfying all of the controls of the regulatory framework that you're bound by, or what your CISO tells you have to do, or keeping it safe. And then, of course, being vulnerable to CrowdStrike when things like that go down. So that's where you want to have your system of redundancy, your independent backups and controls, and understanding if something fails, if this goes down, what do we do? What do we do next? So CrowdStrike is something that was brought up in the question, and I'll say that we were able to help our customers navigate CrowdStrike because a lot of them were able to just roll back to the last backup, right? So having a regular system of backups, they were able to roll it back 24 hours, and it was the update never took place. And so having that system in place, it's one thing to have it as a requirement and have it documented as part of your SOPs that you have these regular backups. But if you're not actually doing it and storing them in another place other than CrowdStrike, it's not going to do you any good. So a system of independent redundancies is really what's going to help you get through those sorts of situations.
Awesome. And we'll go to the audience now.
So you brought up being able to do things like, for example, Dungeons & Dragons, those unstructured games.
Yeah.
Are there any tabletop games you would recommend that maybe already has some of those footprints? Because ultimately, as much as we can thrive in the chaos, you still need some level of structure, I would assume, so that, hey, these are some of the things you should think about. Yeah,
absolutely. And you want to guide your teams, right? So you don't want to just have them walk in and say, okay, anything goes, everybody, because then what you end up with is just a bunch of people talking about the scariest stuff they saw on TV, which is also fine. But I think Dungeons & Dragons is a great example. If you have somebody who is interested in playing that Dungeon Master role and putting together that training scenario, and I think you'd be surprised at the number of communities like ISC Squared and CMMC and the DEF CON, the local DEF CON group and things like that. Security professionals are already thinking that way, right? They're already thinking about what's the worst case scenario? What would be really terrible for our organization? If you don't have someone who wants to build out a scenario for your critical incident response team to come in and play, or they just don't feel like they can, backdoors and breaches is a great one. So that's straight out of the box, it's local. In fact, I think you can download the PDF for free, and then purchasing the cards is nominal. And you can get a feel for playing it online for free. It's a card game. It's structured very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, but it's got a lot more direct prompts that can help get you through. And I think even doing that a few times would free you up then to take a little bit more of a novel approach and designing your own scenario.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Backdoors and breaches.
All right, going back to Slido here for a question. Do you think that a preparedness for a future cyber strike is more of a technical problem or a behavioral problem?
Yes. I think it's both. I mean, it's absolutely both, and I think I think there's an over-reliance on systems and the understanding that systems are going to continue to work, right? And so if we don't have a deep understanding of what our systems do, what lives inside of our ecosystem, when it goes down, we don't know how to troubleshoot it. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to get past it. If there's a huge, especially if it's AI, if there's a huge system that's in between you and the output of your work and it fails, then what do you do next? And it all depends on how much ownership you have over that system, which is why over-reliance on artificial intelligence is so dangerous, because you're outsourcing your own brain at that point, right? So if you are someone who relies really heavily on Excel to calculate, complicated formulas and statistical means, if that goes down, you can get a better understanding on how to manually calculate all those statistics, right? If you are someone who doesn't know how to calculate the statistics, then you go onto your calculator and you start trying to hand jam the numbers yourself. Or you pull in your teammate who you know is really good at math and really good at understanding those things, which is where that cross-functional training comes into play, right? So understanding if you're part of the critical incident response team and you're talking with a program manager or a program lead or someone who understands exactly how the system is deployed and what people do with it and how they interact with it, but they don't understand, I call them magical tree elves, but what the people who are on the inside, the deep technical coders, are doing to make the system work, I can talk to you about how it's supposed to look, I can talk to you about how it works in the real world, and I can communicate with the end users on what that's supposed to be, while I also communicate back to my technical people, we have to bridge this gap somehow, and this critical system has failed. And a lot of times they can start putting together new ways for things to work, or ways to work around it, or ways to troubleshoot the issue until we can get everything back and up and running. So it's a combination of a technical problem and a human problem. And I think it's also, when we think about it in that way, it pits those two as adversarial in nature, like humans versus technology, and we're in this push and pull, as opposed to we are human beings using a tool set to do what we want to do.
All right, and that's about all the time we have. Please give a round of applause for Andrea.
Thank you very much.